Okay, hello and welcome back. I'm Justana, and this is When Stars Collide by Steamberry Studios. So, we started with chapter 1 last week, 24th, I know. So yeah, it was, 24th was last Thursday. So normally I would wait until tomorrow because I just woke up about 2 hours ago after working a night shift, but I have plans for tomorrow, so we're gonna do this today. So one of the things, so in the gallery, we figured out why I got the error message in the gallery for the other last week. It was because the way the skin tones work in the actual game is different from the way the skin tones work in the demo. And the game only had the information from the demo to work with. So I didn't play through the prologue as Lane, but I did play through the prologue as, I think I just went with Will for this character's name. I don't remember. But basically this is when the main character wakes up in the prologue. That's what that's from. So, the nice thing about having save sections for each love interest, I can keep this for just the main playthrough, except for the save that I did for Asher. So, so I have unlocked all the bonus scenes for chapter 1, including the one for Cav. You do meet him in the bonus scene with Noel as well. But I'm not gonna play through all of these. And you can see by the flowchart for chapter 1, I have played through it several times. I've played with all the dialogue options. I haven't picked that dialogue option. I think I know what that one does. But I deliberately, with the various potential love interests, with the actual dialogues, with the conversations with them, I picked the dialogue options that gave me affinity with them. So that's what these yellow lines mean, is that's the course the dialogue took. I will probably eventually pick the other options, but right now I'm just trying to, I know who I'm romancing for each, I know that I'm gonna do everything I can to get good endings with the romances off stream. So anyway, let's go ahead and jump in. So chapter 2, the RS Ophelia. I can write, honestly. I've been writing for years, decades even. Okay, the RS Ophelia. Here we go. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, hands behind my head, ankles crossed. So this is completely new to me. Like, the previous, chapter 1 was basically the demo. Prologue in chapter 1 was basically the demo, so it wasn't anything surprising. So this is completely new. I stretched my mind across the ship, listening to the hum of the engine, the pulse of plasma through the ship's circuitry, the tick of machinery, the chirping of insects in the garden. I tried to time my breathing to the faint pulsing of the engine, slow, steady, calming. 1,000 thoughts turned over in my head, memories on repeat. Things like Kurt's birthday last week and the party the crew threw for them. I didn't know them well, but it was fun. I gave them a book and had an enjoyable time with everyone. I remember thinking that the ship was going to feel like a place I could stay for a while. Flynn and Tisa were caught in a maintenance tube having a liaison of sorts 3 days ago. They were punished with docked pay and having to clean the toilets for 2 weeks. Tisa looked so smug about the whole thing when she grinned and said, "Worth it," after her reprimand. Zara was planning to retire in 2 months, to a cabin on Rishara, she said. Laurent was getting married. Vash was going to become an aunt soon. But, vivid as the memories were, it wasn't 3 days ago, was it? It wasn't a week or 2 months, or soon. 5 centuries had swallowed those events, those people, and severed the thin threads that tied me to them. It was all long past, and they were dust. Memories, if I was being kind, instead of allowing the dark cynicism burning in the hollow of my chest to take over. As much as I tried to not think about it too hard, during the slow tick of each moment I stayed in the oppressive silence of my quarters, their faces and laughter kept flashing through my mind. I rolled over and pressed my face into the pillow to stifle the groan of frustration. No matter how hard I tried, I somehow couldn't just drift through the situation as I drifted through so many other things. This time was difficult. A quiet alarm sounded, the only herald for morning on a ship like this, and it was time to leave such futile thoughts behind to start my day. Thank God. I dragged myself out of bed into the bathroom for a shower so I could drown the self-pity in steam. Showers are so good. And then I headed to my first breakfast with the crew, which Laren encouraged me to try now that I no longer had to work so hard to rest. Apparently, socializing would be good for me. Apparently. Okay, right, dice. Okay. For the most part, I'm going to let the dice choose for me, like I have been, because it's fun. There we go. Oh, that's not a D6. There we go. That's a D6. So it's a D6, so 6 sides, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Four. I would rather mope, frankly. And I am also writing down my choices for the other routes. Just for funsies. On an intellectual level, I knew there was no value in it, and surely I needed to pick up and move on. Wait. Okay. I was just curious if it changed. Okay, it doesn't affect the romance, okay. On an intellectual level, I knew there was no value in it, and surely I needed to pick up and move on, because what else could I do? Lie in one place and continue to pretend time wasn't passing by? But there was a part of me that wanted to allow myself to mope. A part of me that also wanted to reject new bonds. I just lost everything, and now I'm supposed to keep going and let myself build up new things to lose the moment my father decided that was the right thing for me? It was stupid to feel that way. Whiny, even. It wouldn't do me any good to avoid the situation, I knew, but I deserved some avoidance and moping. If I allowed it, I'd lose my motivation to do anything else for far too long, probably. It's not like it would make me feel anything but worse. So, no matter how reluctantly, I was still on my way to the galley and mess hall to eat with the others. Doc said your metabolism would be in overdrive when you were awake again, but this is ridiculous. Oh, she's so cute. I like her eyes. I wonder what's her species supposed to be. Tangerine Queen. Tangerines transcend space and time. I gave Kato an amused look over my third plate of a very delicious breakfast and shoved another tangerine slice in my mouth with a shrug. I don't think I've had tangerines, actually. I've had oranges. I was hungry. Couldn't help that. She was just teasing, of course. Kaito seemed particularly wary of me when we first met, and the few times she'd seen me after that initial meeting. She got over it fast and had been welcoming since I joined them all for breakfast. But she was at least partially breachy if I was basing it on the eyes, and they were known to be extremely friendly. Rishin and the Breachy. Rishin is a T-class super Terra orbiting a yellow dwarf in a binary system with a sister star that is a red dwarf. The Breachy are the dominant species on the planet, a race with 4 subspecies that intermarry and, while genetically distinct, consider themselves to be a single species. Okay. To be fair to the rest of the crew, almost everyone else seemed equally generous, if not quite as willing to jump straight into teasing. Even the ones that had seemed apprehensive the first time around were more accepting now. That included Rafe. Gosh, the romance with Rafe is going to be fun. I suppose Laren had been right that it was a good thing to socialize despite my apprehension. I was feeling a little better. The teasing helped a lot. I imagined everyone's willingness to accept me, odd history and all, was aided by having stayed in my quarters sleeping off my hibernation hangover and moping the last couple of days. It gave everyone time to get used to the idea of me before having to actually look at me again, or to meet me for the first time for those who hadn't. The longer I stuck around and didn't bite the ship in half or try to take over the galaxy, the more I seemed like a normal person. Most of the initial trepidation about my arcane heritage had faded quickly, though that could have something to do with watching me shove tangerine slices in my mouth without even the slightest hint of grace or manners. The telepathy was an accepted means of communication now, too, which was a relief. I guess they saw it as just another quirk, which was a little novel for me, actually. My attention was drawn back to breakfast, and the amused smirk Kaito was giving me over her coffee. I continued to enjoy the tangerine and ignored that I probably looked like a horse from my grandfather's old place on Laertes. So I mentioned this before. The ship is named Ophelia, and the planet that the main character grew up on is called Laertes. Both are references to Hamlet, because they are brother and sister in Hamlet. So I find that interesting. It had been ages since I'd had a tangerine, even if you didn't count the 500-year nap. I'm very curious about how many of those tangerines you're going to be able to devour before you explode. I hope you realize fillets have 3 stomachs. I didn't ask to go 500 years without eating. Not my fault they're delicious. It's rude to comment on someone's eating habits, thank you very much. Don't blame me, I'm just following doctor's orders. Okay, we're gonna roll a d6 again. If I roll a 6, I'm gonna roll again. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6. 3. Not my fault they're delicious. Blame Jiren? Unless they're not grown here. Are they grown here? I glanced Jiren's way. He was sitting a few seats down looking at a data pad, not seeming to pay attention to our antics, and responded without looking up. Just, Interesting. We don't have any fruit trees aboard. Pomology is a bit complex for the limited ecosystems in our life support system, but there are a few crates of them in the cryo store to keep them fresh. I guess he was paying attention after all. He hadn't seemed to be, but given the gentle amusement I realized was rolling off him, he'd been listening enough to know Kaito was teasing me. Oh, I forgot to write down the choice. Okay. Wrong there. Part of me is tempted to go back and redo some of the decisions so that I get my affinity with Asher up, but I haven't decided yet. I haven't fully decided if I'm going to romance Asher or someone else. In that case, don't blame me around for the tangerines. I guess I have to take all the blame. In case, wait, no. Let's blame my father. Definitely better blame someone who isn't here to refute it. Exactly, which means I'm going to be putting a lot of things on him the next few months, I think. Though, for the record, the Sharon kale is good too, and I have a feeling that one was grown here. I hope our hydroponic stores hold out now that you're aboard. If it's going to be like this from now on, we might be in trouble. Blame my father for that one too. I'm fine with it. The increased energy needs are temporary, Kay. And I believe our hydroponics garden can withstand the stasis-induced metabolic surge of a single individual, no matter how much they love tangerines. I don't know, we have a few more weeks out here. I'm getting worried. We have quite a few more weeks out here. I'm getting worried. That sounds terrible. Laren probably has something to treat the anxiety. I laughed a little at the gentle ribbon. Despite my earlier reluctance, it was nice to be included in it, instead of being treated like an outsider. Riveting as this conversation is, I'm out. See you kids later, as some of us have work to do. All of us have work to do, Ray. Couldn't tell by looking at you. He smirked over his shoulder as he disappeared into the hall. Unfortunately, I also need to be heading down to the lab to check on some things. Cav is apparently already waiting for me. Cav is at work this early? Have the stars aligned or something? I'm sure some stars somewhere are aligned. He shows up on time occasionally, believe it or not. Lane, if you're hungry at any point, don't hesitate to come to hydroponics. It's important to get your strength back up, so don't worry about anyone else's complaints. Yeah, she'll remember, Mother. She knows I'm just teasing. Thrun just laughed again and vanished into the hall. For a few minutes, the room was silent. Wrapping my hands around the cup, I stared into my blackberry tea thoughtfully. Blackberry. It was strange. I've been so reluctant to come down here to talk to everyone, and yet, all through breakfast, something had been nagging at the back of my mind. A strange and misplaced sense of nostalgia, longing for something beyond recall, a memory of these people that didn't exist, couldn't exist. It was a pleasant but alarming sensation that stirred complicated feelings each time I had a moment to pause and examine it. I had been aware of it the first time I met everyone, but it was easily set aside when I wasn't spending time with them. Now, though, it was difficult to ignore. My father had surely predicted this, and it brought so many questions to the forefront of my mind. On one hand, I could imagine what this warm familiarity meant. On the other, there was a sort of fight or flight instinct trying to kick in because of it. These people were nice. But that's why the familiarity was more frightening than not recognizing anything at all. Those threads of recognition trying to hook into me and tangle me with these people. Part of me wanted to fling myself headlong into that knot of paths. The other part simply felt guilty that I felt a tentative bond with people I'd only just met, and had never felt it with the others before I lost them. Vash, Zare, they were friends, and I missed them. That made what I felt here almost like a betrayal of sorts. No, but it was also just such a uniquely Valayan sensation that I wanted to kick myself for feeling it. So instead, I kept making myself think about what I'd lost, because letting it go and moving on felt so final and cruel. That was why I still hadn't worked up the courage to look up my old chip or any record of what happened to anyone. Those bonds, forged through time and experience and work, they were the ones that deserved my thoughts right now, not this new thing my father had served up on a platter, enticing as it was. Those were the thoughts that kept plaguing me behind the laughter and teasing anyway, and especially now, after it had gone quiet again. I let out a soft breath, closing my eyes as I finished the tea. I wrapped up the warm nostalgia growing in my chest, and I filed it away in the back of my mind, locking it firmly there. No, the bland part of me that wanted to insist I might belong here would have to wait. As much as I hate to go, it's time for me to head to the engine room too. Rafe will complain if I'm much later than they are. Oh, hello there. Why is everyone so cute? And you've seen how annoying their complaining is. It's not so bad, but have a nice day at work. See you at lunch. Sim, Rafe's assistant, whom I'd met for the first time earlier, Lean down to share a quick kiss with Kato before shooting the rest of us a smile and heading out. Aww. Dang it, why are all the hot ones taken? I mean, they're all hot, that's the problem. But oh my gosh, they're so cute together! I had started to learn the relationships of the crew members over breakfast, but I picked up a few tidbits from my trips to medical as well. Sim and Kato were in a serious relationship. Fraze and Laren were married. Gates was married, but his spouses, more than one spouse. Interesting. Viv Dumpel married 4. He was the one that traveled regularly. Noel and all the others were single. Shrevey, one of their lab gremlins, had several mates and adult children and grandchildren. There was a bridge officer named Dan who was engaged to the cousin of Gates' wife, and Laren's nurse, whom I had talked to a few times before being released, was Fraze's nephew. And he was dating Uren's assistant, Mila, whom I hadn't met. I wasn't sure about any of the others I had yet to meet, but ships like this always had interesting dynamics among the crew. That was certain. For sure, because they're all stuck in this little metal container together for months, maybe even years at a time. And I could only imagine there was more I had yet to learn. And anyway, after Sim left, Kato wasn't far behind. Not without a parting shot, though. Try not to completely clean up the galley while we're gone. I'll do my best to restrain myself. Can't make promises if I find the cryo store of tangerines, though. She was grinning as she left. I was about to head up to the bridge lane. If you're finished, do you want to come with me? When Noel was here earlier, he mentioned you were stopping by. Oh, right. I'd almost forgotten that. Sure, hyperactive metabolism or not, there are only so many tangerines I can eat just to tease someone. There's always lunch. Alright, let me clean up my dishes first and I'll come with. So how's it feel to be officially back in the world of the waking? Was it not official before? Official status was revoked when you went back to sleep for 36 hours. I didn't sleep the entire 36 hours. It was off and on, and after that I was under orders to stay in my quarters and take it easy. Stasis recovery is rough. And I'll have you know that apparently parts of my brain are still inactive, according to Laren anyway. Hopefully not the parts you need. Seems like some of them are related to my telepathy. My range is a lot more limited than usual. But I'm up and getting around okay, so I guess it's fine. Plenty of people out there seem to operate on partial brain function anyway. Well, that's a good one. Some of them on this very crew. But Asher didn't catch that look Daz gave him. Daz snickered. Asher, however, was giving me a clueless smile. Hope the space bolts haven't been too bad for you since you woke up. I've heard they're pretty lousy for people who aren't used to them, or if you're not feeling well. Oh, I'm plenty used to them. I mean, I know it's been a while, but traveling by fold has been around since well before I went into stasis, Asher. Only if you're used to traveling outside the hub. Which the last ship I was on did all the time. You know how slow cruising speed is? Even in the meridians. Fold is pretty much the only way to travel. What are you doing with all that? It may have been a while ago, chronologically speaking, but I imagine it feels like just a few days ago for you. That has to be disorienting. Still coming to terms with that. My brain is convinced that a few days ago I was on a routine cargo haul in deep space. Still difficult to comprehend the time that's passed. There's no actual point of reference out here. I'm sure that when we make it back to space dock, it'll feel a little more real. So you were on some sort of deep space vessel before? Yeah, basically, just hauling cargo and mining equipment through the meridians. That's why I should have expected something was up when my father's ship showed up without warning. The land ships don't just show up to poke at some tiny freighter in the middle of nowhere. I can still remember the disbelief on everyone's faces. Did they know you were Valayan before that? Well, that's hard to answer. No one asked, so I never said anything. I didn't talk to them the way I talked here, not to everyone anyway. But, yeah, sorry. It was just one of those things, a sort of open secret, I guess. Some people knew, others guessed, no one talked about it. And then my father's ship tumbled out of a void and he said he wanted to talk to me. The main reason I agreed to go aboard his ship to talk was because everyone was so freaked out, I thought it'd be better that way. Then I was waking up here, still mad at him. Anyway, this started with you worried about me handling folds okay, Asher, and me saying I'm used to it. Besides, the folds I was awake for were pretty smooth by comparison to the virtuoso on my last ship, anyway. I mean, we didn't have enough funding to pay for an elite, but still, you're much better than the one we had. Asher lifted his shoulder, mouth curling into the already familiar grin as if to say, obviously. The Ophelia gets around a lot. I've got a fair amount of experience and a heavy helping of natural talent. And plenty of hubris to go with it, if you hadn't noticed. I had noticed, actually. If you got it, you got it. Ain't gonna pretend I don't. Okay. Okay, I'm not gonna roll for this one. Let's go with appreciative. Yes, good. There's nothing wrong with acknowledging your strengths, as long as you also acknowledge your weaknesses. Have to have a weakness before you can acknowledge it. Oh my gosh. If you need me to list them, I'm more than ready. And they were off. Despite what Daz might say, the space bolts had been smoother than most. That painful jolt I was so used to as the ship crossed the threshold was almost imperceptible. Honestly, the only time I encountered bolts that smooth were with virtuosos far older than Asher's. I couldn't help but be a little impressed with him. How well a virtuoso could resonate with the surrounding vibrations was dependent on experience, and Asher was on par with pilots far older than he was. That couldn't just be from this ship's travel. So, like it or not, there was a certain truth to what he said. Their bickering died down after a moment, and we walked in silence for a little ways before Dad spoke again. So, Lane, you mentioned you kept yourself out of Valayan politics and didn't associate with factions? I was a little curious about that. About Valayan factions, I mean. We know so little about Valayan culture, but I was reading more about their radio. Not that I think it's relevant or anything, just, curious. I spent relatively little time with my father's people at all, if I'm being honest. I didn't even meet any of them until my late teens, and then I spent a relatively short period of time with them. Where were you born then? Is it okay to ask that? It's fine to ask, but I don't know if you've heard of Laertes. It was a small Terran colony back then. I don't know what it's like now. Oh, probably much bigger than back then, I'd assume anyway, since I wouldn't call it small these days. An ex-boyfriend was from there, and I visited a few times while we were seeing each other. I don't remember too much about it, except that there's a deep trench there that's popular for racing. Remember that. Dangerous as hell, but really popular. Now this is pod racing. Sorry, couldn't resist that. Oh, you ever raced there? Hell no. Terrestrial vehicles aren't my thing, and I don't have a death wish. Cambry took me to see it, and I remember it being like looking into a pit of darkness. But rusty trenches were famous even back then. I'm not surprised some adrenaline junkie decided it would be good for racing. I've never visited there myself, though. To be honest, I left Laertes after my mother died, and I never went back. And what did you do after you left? For a few years after that, I hopped around different ships like this one. Well, mostly freighters. There were some research ships, though. I spent some time on Valea during that period, and let's say I wasn't a fan, so it wasn't long before I left there as well. Any particular reason you didn't like it? I could see exactly what he was thinking. How could I possibly go to an Archaean homeworld and not be enchanted? Okay. Now we're gonna roll for this one. If I can find a D4. There it is. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. One. Just felt empty. I mean, either of these are valid reasons to not want to go back. It just felt empty, or maybe hollow is a better way to just say it. It's difficult to put into words, really. Sometimes there's just a feeling to a place, a vibrancy. You can feel it permeate everything, from the people to the environments. Everything feels alive and breathing, changing all the time. And some places lack that, sometimes to the point that even the people feel colorless, like they've forgotten how to live. A lot of Chilean places are like that. Even they admit it. Some of them. Sometimes. Maybe because I was raised here and Valleja never felt like the right place for me. It was beautiful, sleek and clean, and somehow completely soulless. It was like so perfect, everything had lost meaning. Sounds like a drag. Was it even that perfect though? War had died down by the time you were born, you said, but surely it wouldn't have happened at all in a perfect society. Well, it wasn't even close to perfect, but it had that feeling of a perfect veneer, razor thin and so brittle, anything that didn't meet the status quo could shatter it. Maybe that's why so many of us chose to live elsewhere. That status quo was stifling. There aren't any perfect societies, Daz. Oh, I believe it. We see remnants of societies that burn themselves out all the time. Many were incredibly advanced, and we still find their ruins on dead, abandoned worlds. I think there are just times a world starts to forget where they came from. When that happens, maybe the only options are to either lose yourself or destroy yourself. That sounds depressing as hell if we're all heading in that direction eventually. I don't know if that place is inevitable. Maybe if you see it coming, you can avoid it by not forgetting where you came from. Or finding meaning some other way. Many Valleans left to try to do that somewhere else because they felt that they couldn't find it here anymore. And others just stayed away from the home world completely. That was what I did. I just knew Valleja wasn't for me the moment I set foot on it. So many of them had turned their eyes elsewhere. And I was still in love with this place, this galaxy. That's why I wanted to stay. There's still much to see and experience here, worlds and people with so much to offer. And I have never wanted to experience it as an Archaean that's isolated from everyone else for fear of somehow irrevocably damaging the natural order of things. I just wanted to live, you know? So I spent time in Valleja, then came back out here and worked on a deep space cargo freighter. Amazing. I mean, I don't think it's that amazing. After Valleja, that kind of ordinary life was welcome. It was just a normal ship hauling around whatever cargo needed to be hauled. Or doing other assignments, some survey missions and things. Back then, we still had the same guilds to contend with. We still traveled by fold or nexus gate. New philosophies, theories, ideas, discoveries, they all travel much slower than the speed of light. So in some ways, I'm sure it's not all that different now from what it was then. At the very least, I imagine more of the galaxy is charted, and there are new technologies. It would be distressing if things have stagnated that much. Well, if ships didn't travel by fold still, I'd be out of a job, so I'm not complaining. Given the state of the gate system these days, fold may be the only way to travel at some point, so I'm certain your job is safe. And for the record, I've heard you complain plenty, Asher. Every day, almost. Only when there's something to complain about. Sure. Interrupted before they could start up again. What about the two of you? Seem to know each other pretty well. Have you been working here a long time? Ha! That's a story and a half right there. Please, I'm all ears. Maybe for you, I'll be the first to admit mine isn't half as interesting as Asher's. Oh. Okay, so who are we going to ask about? I've definitely already started a Daz route. So we're going to ask about Asher. A story and a half? Now that makes me curious. If I can be honest, it surprised me to learn you're a virtuoso when we first met. Seemed a bit young to be leading ships all the way this deep into space, for one. It's usually reserved for older virtuosos, isn't it? Then again, I didn't think Asher was with the Navigation Guild. Most virtuosos on my past ships didn't mingle with the crew much. Virtuosos had a reputation for being so wrapped in the songs of the cosmos they forgot how to communicate with others, or else they were just exceptionally arrogant. No, Asher might have that same depth to his mind, but his personality reminded me a lot more of the pilots I got to know when I worked on ships that stayed close to the hypergate hub. Those that weren't virtuosos but focused on normal spaceflight. Brash, cocky, and arrogant in a different way. I wasn't trained by the guild, so I guess that's why I'm younger than the others you've met. Don't really follow their standards. And I have no intention of leaving the Ophelia, so there's that. I mean, I wouldn't have minded some cushy guild position, but someone dropped the ball when it came to finding me, and that never happened. So you're an untrained virtuoso? And you haven't cursed the ship into oblivion yet? No, we're gonna ask the other question. Impressive. You must have a natural talent for it to be as good as you are. Most have to go through years of training to be able to create long-distance folds, or repeated short-distance ones. That's why the ones that could get a ship out this far were more expensive, and were usually older. Natural talents, though. There were virtuosos like that, those who could hear the song without trying, but they were few and far between, or at least they had been in the past. If the gate system was still losing stability, someone like Asher would be in high demand. To be honest, the previous captain helped me out a lot, including with how to fold properly. It took a few years before I could carry the entire ship through a long-distance fold, though. And I've been able to hear Star's song since I can remember. Once I had the tools to fold spades, it wasn't that hard to improve. Huh, definitely a rare talent even among the elite, then. Suppose he had a valid reason to be a little arrogant. Does that mean you've been here on the ship for a while, then? Since I was 16. I wasn't sure what that meant exactly, since I didn't know how old he was now. Early to mid-20s if I had to guess, so maybe getting close to 10 years or so? What he means to say is that he stowed away at 16 and got caught a few days later, just so you know. Sounds about right. If this was what I have gotten to, what we've gleaned from about Asher so far. He needed a ride. This was as good a ship as any. To be clear, he needed a ride off the station where he was living because he owed someone a lot of money and they wanted him to pay up. That part's true too, but you do what you gotta to survive. Sometimes that means stealing, and sometimes that means borrowing. And if you're just a kid, that means you can't always pay your debts. Sounds rough. Yeah, well, it happens. I wasn't the only one struggling. There are a lot of orphans out there, and if they're lucky, they can jump from place to place, scrounging food and scraping together a living. And when you make too many enemies in one place, you leave or you vanish. I was lucky I always got out before I vanished. I'm debating between this one or this one. Let's go compassionate. I want to see. Okay, I'm curious. What does intrigue get me? Okay, definitely prefers that you be intrigued. Okay. We'll stick with this. That's what I thought. I mean, even if I'd stuck with compassion, it still would have got me affinity with him. Hear more about him, I couldn't help but be a little fascinated with his story. He'd gone from a scrappy orphan to a talented starship pilot and virtuoso. On a ship which, by all appearances anyway, many people would consider themselves lucky to work on. And he did it by sheer force of perseverance and good fortune, though my father would say it was just his path. His fate. Perhaps there was some truth to that. The path that led him here. And then led the Ophelia to me because of him. I peered at Asher with curiosity as we walked, wondering what else there was to learn about him. Anyway, I thought my luck had run out when I got caught on this ship, but it turns out it was the best thing that happened to me. Jamie couldn't could have tossed me out an airlock. Instead, she gave me a meal, a bath, a bed. She worked out I was a normal kid pretty fast. It's funny, but I didn't even know it wasn't common for others to hear a star song until then. I thought everyone could. That reminds me of a D&D character that I played for about a year. And then it was during COVID, and things started opening back up, and people just didn't have the time anymore. But anyway, my character didn't realize that he was a fallen Aasimar. He thought all humans could see in the dark and cast the cantrip light, because he could do it and his best friend could do it. But they were both fallen Aasimars. Basically, they grew up in an orphanage, so they had no idea about their parentage, and never got a chance to really explore that. But there were definite threads for my character to get to know his people, to connect with the Aasimar. But the game fell apart before that could happen. I mentioned it a few times growing up, and probably made everyone around me think I was just some weird-ass kid. Children can be strange in general, but I'm surprised no one put it together. Some child claiming they could hear the stars seemed like it would have been a red flag. In most places where I grew up, no one listened to what kids had to say. Hell, I wouldn't be surprised if there were kids smart enough to claim to hear it just to get out of the hellholes they lived in. I'm lucky I didn't get sold off by someone who took it seriously. It's interesting that Jamie trained you herself rather than turn you over to the guild. Well, I was 16 by then, probably too old for the guild to invest in. I doubt that. Virtuosos are uncommon, and the Navigation Guild is always eager to have more of them in the ranks regardless of age. If you can hear the song, that's all that matters. That sounds like Endgame. That's how it used to be anyway. To be fair, I guess I didn't want to go. I was a little shit back then, and back then? I was waiting for that. Waiting. Asher smirked and rolled his eyes, giving Daz a playful punch on the arm. Wait a minute. It should be... Am I getting... Hang on. Settings. There is sound, it just didn't get anything to go with that. Okay. I didn't handle authority well, so I doubt I'd have done well in the guild anyway. Basically, I just didn't want to go. I stayed here, and I've been here ever since. I'm glad you found your place, even if it was a journey for you to get here. It's always nice to have somewhere to belong. We reached the bridge a few moments later, and Daz motioned me across the room. I believe you'll find Noel waiting for you. It was nice to talk with you a little more, Lane. Of course, you too. I'll catch you later, Lane, I'm sure. It is a small ship. Asher grinned as the two of them went to their stations, leaving me loitering by the door for a moment. So cool. And I like that it has all the plants around. Makes it a little more welcoming. It doesn't feel sterile the way the ships on Star Trek feel. And even Star Wars. Like, no one thinks about the fact that people who breathe oxygen will need help with that, and I like that they're using plants to keep the air fresh. The bridge was busier than I expected. Noel and Fraze were both there, as well as Rafe, who appeared to be doing maintenance. I thought he went to the engine room, but I suppose an engineer's job sometimes took them to other parts of the ship occasionally. I'd served on a few bigger vessels where the engine rats, as some called them, never showed their faces outside the engine room. Small ships like this one operated on entirely different principles. The casual atmosphere, shared responsibilities, and the bonds that were clear through the tangled way everyone was connected. Another pang of loss hit me, and I pushed those thoughts away. Gates was at his station as well, looking busy with something. Another surprising face on the bridge was Dren. He was checking out some of the life support terrariums along one wall. There were some unfamiliar faces as well, probably junior officers I just hadn't had the opportunity to meet yet. I only stood there about a minute before Noel noticed me and grinned from the other side of the bridge. He set down whatever he was working on with Fraze and came towards me. So she awakes, hopefully for good this time? Well, I still need at least 4 hours of sleep a night, so maybe not for good, but at least for a while. I'm pleased to see you're doing well. You look better than before. Brighter. Definitely less exhausted. I feel a lot better, too. Oh gosh, yes. I always feel better after I've gotten some sleep. I worked, I didn't go to work on Monday because it was my birthday. And I wanted to stay up later, but I was so tired because I'd worked the night before. I ended up going back to bed. Went to bed early. Don't mind me, just looking through my notebook here. Oh, yeah, okay. I don't know where we're going to get back to that. Okay. Just trying to get things sorted for later. Anyway, yeah, I feel a lot better too. Sleep does wonders. Sleep and food. By the way, he was terrified when you wouldn't wake up after crashing again, that you're going to die, and kept having Laren check on you every hour. Oh, really? A hint of color rose on Noel's face as he glared at Asher. How can you tell? His skin is so dark. Not every hour, but I was obviously concerned. No one was expecting another crash. I thought maybe that meeting had... Well, it doesn't matter. You were still recovering and I wanted to make sure you were alright, that's all. Thank you for worrying about me. I'm pretty tough, so I don't think you'll have to be so concerned going forward. Well, not sure that needs thanks, especially since you were fine in the end, just tired. Well, it's pretty funny seeing the cool-headed captain panic, though. Noel cleared his throat and pulled me away from the others a little. I did not panic, but I was concerned, of course. I'd never dealt with anyone who came out of long-term stasis. I had no idea what to expect. He motioned me into the conference room located just off the bridge, the same one where I'd met everyone before. I looked at him questioningly. I can't talk, I swear. Questioningly when the door slid shut behind us. So, you wanted to have a chat? Well, we have a few things to discuss now that you're up for it. Yeah. I won't beat around the bush. I'm not sure if Laren and the others mentioned this to you, but I think you should know. The short version is that our boss in Palmyra 4 already knows about you and the valet and items we found, to some degree. I realize you may prefer it to be otherwise, but unfortunately circumstances worked out so that I couldn't hide it. One of our protocols is to send a tachyon communication before we enter every black hole. It has our exact coordinates, etc. Protocol also requires we send another when we exit. Before we even knew what that cube was, I'd recorded our exit message relaying that we'd found a dark world and unknown type 3 or 4 technology. It was set to relay automatically when we passed back into real space. After we discovered you, I sent another message since, well, finding a person is a big deal. I'm sorry, I sound like I'm just trying to justify myself. The point is, I wasn't trying to out you as Valayan or anything like that. All of this happened before we even identified your species. What exactly did you tell them? Initially, just that we found unidentified technology and artifacts, and later that an unidentified person had been in stasis, and the stasis unit had deactivated, but you were still unconscious. We don't send a lot of tachyon messages back and forth. As you know, I'm sure it takes a hell of a lot of power to beam a message faster than light across the galaxy. Heck yeah. We used the ergosphere's rotation to boost the signal on our way in and out, but after that, the ergosphere is a region located outside of black hole's outer event horizon. The outer surface of the ergosphere is called the static surface or static limit. Well, regardless, this was deemed pretty high priority. We've gone back and forth about it a few times since then. They've wanted updates, of course, and it was too late to pretend we hadn't found you. Ah, so you're saying at this point you've told them the whole story, or you're going to, yeah? I don't see how I can avoid letting them know who you are without deliberately concealing it, which I'm not sure is in your best interest. The more I hide it, the more they'll realize it's significant. I know you may have wanted to keep it down on the down low, but I can't hide it from my boss at this point. Jamie's a very by-the-books kind of lady, but it's already agreed that you will be left out of the official reports to the guild. We're required to file a summary on our cargo even if we don't work for them. That doesn't mean we have to tell them about you. That's private information. I'm sorry if this puts you in an awkward position. I know you probably didn't want your identity blasted across space-time. There just wasn't a way to avoid it. Boy. Okay. Interesting. How do I feel about this? Let's set the dice aside. There they are. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. Two. Understanding. You don't realize how long a word is until you write it out by hand. It's not awkward exactly, and I understand you were in a difficult position. Did that change any? No. Yes, it did. But no, of course. I understand you were in a difficult position. This is just your job, so reporting your finds is natural. I couldn't deny that it might be best if as few people as possible knew where I was or that I was here at all. But I still had way too little information to gauge what my identity would mean in the grand scheme of things. 500 years was a long time. There's no use in being angry about a few additional people knowing at this point. You don't have to stress yourself out about this. I'm sure it'll be okay. Listen, I don't think R&J will share this information with others. They have no reason to. And while others might feel it'd be wise to report the existence of a possible RKN. Having met you now, I can say that I don't think others need to know about you. It's not that kind of situation. In any case, we don't have to file a report on our findings until we reach space dock. For now, we'll need to all prefer to keep it under wraps. Our ship has a hold full of alien tech anyway, so they have no incentive to share the information. And we aren't sending any additional messages about our cargo. You won't be the only one affected if others find out about it while we're still out here. That's true. It's been a while, but I'm aware how secure comm channels are out here, Captain Romero. That is to say, I know they're not. Exactly, that was my thought too. Not for anyone determined enough to listen in. Please call me Noel. No one here calls me Captain Romero. A guest certainly shouldn't. Noel, then. What I mean to say is that I remember how rumors propagate around comm channels and relays because of leaked snippets of private communications. If it's not the UC monitoring deep space finds, then it could be one of the guilds. Another ship, and I assume raiders are still an issue, mercenaries, anyone. So I appreciate the reassurance, but I won't deny that. But even so, the chances of someone trying to listen to our messages is relatively small. Well, all things considered, and given the passage of time, it may be the items that need the most secrecy anyway. I highly doubt there's anyone looking for a lone Belayan these days. Well, we won't be sending any more messages about it at this point beyond a brief explanation, and there's no reason to think the previous communications weren't secure. And you're right about people listening in or catching stray snippets. Of course, we try to make sure any messages about our cargo stay encrypted. We use an insignia shield as well. But encryptions could be broken. Everything else aside, I'm grateful you're willing to leave me out of any official reports. Like I said, you're a private individual. There's no reason to include that anywhere outside our ship logs, and no one is entitled to those but my boss. Though at some point I was going to have to explain where I came from, and maybe how I ended up on this ship. That shouldn't be too hard. People traverse the galaxy from unknown places all the time. In the worst case, I just have to apply for a temporary travel or residence pass at some point. But we want to get our story straight before then. Still, I could push that off until later. Whatever else happens, I don't want to create any additional turmoil for you. A few hundred years ago, it might not have been so odd to see any stray scions roaming around, but now, of course, it's a little hard to predict the reaction. No one is going to be looking for one, but if they hear any Archaean is just hanging around, everyone might be shocked to learn they're probably not even all that hard to find. I prefer to be viewed as Terran anyway, not a scion. We're gonna roll a dice. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4. As this was the response I wanted to go with anyway. I prefer to be viewed as Terran anyway. Did I save that? Yes. I prefer to be viewed as Terran anyway, not a Scion, and definitely not an Archaean. And finding a Terran in long-term stasis isn't necessarily going to cause a big stir. Yeah, I can agree with that. It's not unheard of to find sleepers that somehow went off the grid, not for 500 years, but even if it's uncommon, it will raise far fewer questions if people see you as a Terran. Especially when people in our field are eager to find something amazing out here. I mean, big discoveries aren't unusual, it's just that the galaxy is so massive that individual chances of one are pretty small. For some, you might be that amazing discovery, and that seems like it would be frustrating. To be treated like an object? Yeah, a little. And I can't deny that there might be a few out there who would assume you have all the secrets to a vast and ancient world waiting to be found. At the very least, the location of said vast and ancient world, if not something more amazing than that. Possibly, especially when that world is quite mysterious and there are supposedly secret ways to get in hidden around the galaxy. Your crew barely batted an eye at it, so that gives me hope. I'm sure it'll be fine. I'll do what I can to ensure it is. Thank you, I appreciate it. So, that was the main thing I wanted to get out of the way, but on another topic we need to discuss now that you're up and about again, and that's the ship's situation and where you fit in. Right now, the Ophelia is heading towards a region of space called the Trillian Biocluster. I don't know if you're familiar with it. We have a few more locations to hit on our assignment, so we're not due at space dock for another few weeks. About 8 in UC standard time, actually, maybe 10. So, basically, 2 to 2.5 months. We could head in early, but it always raises questions, so I was hoping you'd be willing to stick around until we head back. I'm not sure I have much choice but to stick around for at least that long. We do have some shuttles, but I wouldn't recommend striking out alone. No, not all the way out here. That said, if it turns out you want to stay longer than 8 weeks, that's fine too. I know it's 500 years is a long time, but like I said in the last stream, basically 500 years ago was so this is 2024. Today is 2024. 500 years before that was 1524. So imagine how much history that was. So I hope that helps. For me, that thinking of it that way helps me to understand exactly how much time has passed for the main character. And what's the girl to do when she wakes up after a 500-year slumber with no home, no job, no money, and no ship? That's what you're thinking, right? Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I guess my point is you have a place here if you want. We woke you up, we'll take responsibility for it. Oh, Noel, you sweetheart. Oh, all the romances are going to be so much fun. I forgot, I didn't realize how shiny the pants are. Thank you, but I can take care of myself. I don't want to be a burden for you. That sense of responsibility is impressive. So we're going to let the dice decide again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Six. The sense of responsibility is impressive. Gotta turn the paper over. Nope, that's not my pencil. That's my pencil. So it's offering to allow me to stay here longer term. I did save it, didn't I? Yes, I did. Huh. That sense of responsibility is impressive. I don't think I have an abnormally strong sense of responsibility. Oh, I'm getting all the affinity with Noel here. So you always offer strange aliens a job when you find them? Well, regardless of whether they're alien to me, I do think we have a habit of welcoming people we come across, if they need a place to feel welcome, of course. So we get a hint of that in the scene with Cav. That only unlocks once you've done talked with all the allies and gotten all the other bonus scenes. And that's a scene between Cav and Noel. He wouldn't be the first. I mean, there's Rafe, Shiren, Cav, even Asher. Asher did mention that earlier, that he stowed away and was taken in. That was before my time here, but yes. In any case, I think feeling a sense of responsibility for the people on this ship comes with the job. Yeah, I definitely, sorry, I had to take a drink. I would say, being a captain you're in charge of the ship and all the lives on it. I mean, Calderon certainly felt responsible for everyone on the crew in Andromeda 6. And definitely, watching Star Trek, every ship captain, Kirk, Picard, even Sisko, Janeway, Archer, they all felt a sense of responsibility for the people on the ship. Not just their crew, but any guests that were aboard too. Or visitors. They have felt that responsibility for them. And Sisko, of course, he's in charge of a space station, so he's not just didn't just feel that responsibility for his crew, but for all the people living on the station and everyone coming and going and stuff. So that's really cool. Not necessarily. I've been on a few ships, met a few captains. Some of them would be outing my identity to the highest bidder if they thought they could make some money from it. No one here is going to do that. Is that really what you thought? That your options were getting sold off or dunked on the nearest habitable moon with some rations? You mentioned that before, too. I don't think I was genuinely expecting it to be that bad, but maybe not quite as welcoming as it has been. I've met plenty of people who are suspicious of allowing strays on their ships. You never know what's going to wash up on the tides out here. Well, that's not how we do things. It's not how I do things. Though I guess I can admit it's thanks to our previous captain. She was the kind of woman who gave many people a second chance, including me, actually. She sounds like a good person. Noel moved to lean against the long ledge at the window, glancing out into the deep as a frown crossed his face. Oh, it's so pretty. Ah! Grabby hands. Yeah, well, if I can be honest, before I came here, you could say I was more like what you mentioned before. Whether I learned something from Jamie or just felt an obligation to follow in her footsteps, sometimes I'm not sure. I can't imagine you like that at all. We're all young and stupid at some point in our lives, and some people never grow out of it. I suppose we are, though now I'm curious what you did with yourself back when you were young and stupid. Nothing good, I can tell you that. Sounds like you were one of those too cocky for your own good types. For my own good, I was too cocky for everyone else's good, too. Enough, I got myself sanctioned by the guild on multiple occasions when I still worked for them. Guild sanctions used to be a little more than a slap on the wrist. They still are, but my ship got into a lot of close calls back then, thanks to me, and I couldn't seem to keep myself out of places I wasn't supposed to be. Until I got my license suspended and my ship impounded, and was told by the guild I had 6 months to sort myself out or quit. And, which did you manage? I got offered a job on the Ophelia before I did either. No idea why Jamie brought me on as first officer, but I learned fast what a good captain is. When did you take over as captain here? About 3 years ago. Jamie retired. She's a good person and captain, but I guess she thought it was time. Robert is the investor that funds all this, though they work together more closely now that Jamie's not out here. Ah, R&J. I've heard this combination. Listen, if there's one thing Jamie instilled in me, it's that I'm the one who has to look after this bunch, and right now, this bunch includes you. So if you need anything, I want you to let me know. He was kind and attractive, the sort even I'd find myself relying on too much if I wasn't careful. If you need anything, does that include you? That will in his route, but I will. But I want you to know that you don't have to burden yourself with a sense of duty for my sake. I'll get myself sorted soon enough. You have a ship to run, and you don't need to worry about some stray you picked up. No one wants a freeloader sticking around. Then what if you aren't a freeloader? Because I was thinking of offering you a job if you want it. For one thing, we're weeks away from space dock. You need to do something to do, and it couldn't hurt to earn a salary while you do it. If only it were that easy to get a job. If you served on ships like this before, I'm sure there's a position you could fill. Well, I have a few areas I could probably help with. I usually stuck to ops since it was a bit easier to blend in there. Of course, it depends on what falls under operations here. I can do administrative organization, but if any maintenance or minor repairs falls in that area, I can manage that too. That's perfect then. You can use a few weeks until we get to space dock as a trial, and if by the time we get there you want to leave, that's fine. No one's going to stop you. If you want to stay, you can do that too. A job, huh? That didn't sound like a bad offer. This was a good ship, a good crew, a good captain. I took a breath and gave him a slight smile. All right, we'll give it a try. We're a few days out from the Dark Forest Nebula to check a few star systems. I think there's a binary pair with a black hole there. We'll be stopping to have a look at that, among other things. The Trillium Biocluster. I'd never heard of it, much less a nebula inside it. I wondered where we were in relation to any structures I actually knew about. He headed to the door, motioning for me to follow, so I guess the main part of our conversation was over. Noel glanced back at me as he stepped onto the bridge. Until we get to the next stop, it's just normal ship operations. Maybe you can spend that time having a look at our cargo hold to make sure nothing in there can destroy the ship. Welcome back, you two. Cav is usually our expert with unfamiliar xenotech, on the rare occasion we encounter it, but he's been a little distracted the last few days while you've been recovering. When he doesn't have anything else to do, he's just an errand boy for the research crew. You say that, but I swear that man knows more about astrophysics than I do. I have no idea why he keeps himself locked away in the lab like that. Something to do with the abject lack of motivation to do anything else, I'd assume. Either way, with you here, we don't have to rely on Cav's tentative exploration of the items in the hold. You can handle the tech portion, and maybe Daz can give you a hand when it comes to any non-technological artifacts of interest. Cav and I usually work together, but I don't mind helping you out this time. Unless that sounds boring as hell and you'd rather do something more interesting, I have it on good authority there's a whole lost Valayan homeworld out there somewhere. We can always make a pit stop there instead. Sounds like it could be a fun excursion. Asher, please. Lane and I literally just had a conversation about this. Try not to turn me into a liar about treating her like a treasure map 2 minutes later. I think it's funny. I'm treating her like a navigation guide, no. I'm definitely not gonna roll a dice for this one. And here we go again. Oh wait, that didn't give me points with Asher? Huh. Oh well. I'm going with the muse because I like it. Noel caught my eye and gave me an apologetic smile, but I just shook my head, unable to conceal my amusement at the look of absolute exasperation on his face. I had a feeling Asher elicited that look from him quite a lot. Nice try. Come on, you must get asked that a lot. No I don't actually. In the past, the homeworld still had a sizable population, including an armada. So people tended to not want to pop over for some pillaging. Still has a population, I'm sure, I just don't know how big it is. I don't want to pillage, just, look around. Because just looking is so very interesting. I mean, depends what you're looking at. Uh-huh. I would find it interesting to look around, but I can't acknowledge some of the things I've heard about the homeworld might inspire pillagers these days. Finding technology that can build artificial wormholes is a huge driving factor for a lot of people who are trying to find Valea, for instance. Given the concerns about gay system stability and the persistent rarity of virtuosos, I would argue that isn't about monetary gains, though. Oh, I'm certain they want to find that technology just for the good of the galaxy for sure. And the good of their retirement fund. I know people consider the planet and the region abandoned, but I maintain that it's unlikely to be completely emptied out. There are definitely people still living there. I can't stress this enough. Even if you knocked and asked them to hand over their wormhole technology to build a replacement gate system, I suspect they would decline. Arcanes sure are pearl clutchy when it comes to their technology, aren't they? Oh, hey, Brave. You'd think they'd be a little more careful about where they dump huge storerooms of it if it was that dangerous. That's why I don't think anything particularly important or useful was in that storeroom with me. I know what they're like. What's the damn problem with everyone else having a little more knowledge? I don't get it. Why are you asking me? I wasn't raised by them and I didn't grow up in their society. But yeah, why would I be asking you of all people? What a mystery. I sighed and rolled my eyes, letting a resigned groan escape. Fine, if I had to answer, I think my father would say there are two sides to every advancement. Something that can help you in one situation can be used to harm you in another. The idea that people need to earn knowledge to be able to use that knowledge responsibly is somewhat at the core of some scion beliefs. Although that only applies to people who aren't Valayans, but that's another story. People could be taught their responsibility at the same time the knowledge is shared with them. Isn't that the same approach when you teach a young person new skills? I guess, in fairness, you only teach young people skills that are appropriate for their level of development. You don't teach young children to pilot a starship. You don't give them tools they can't use safely, and so on. Phew, good thing we had the scions around to keep us children from learning too much and hurting ourselves or causing harm to the galaxy until, they decide to do it for us. Didn't we already say that Lane wasn't responsible for answering for Valayans as a species? I'm not asking anyone to answer for anyone. I'm just making an observation. I have something in my eye. What the heck? Okay, I think it's gone. Sorry. A very pointed observation, Rafe. Valayans did used to share their knowledge, for the record, before the self-imposed exile. Let me guess, they shared it with the wrong people with tragic results? What happened? The people they shared it with blow themselves up? I glanced at Noel, motioned me to answer with a resigned smile as he leaned against one of the seats at the front of the bridge. You have to understand that the story was very much told to me as a cautionary tale, so I'm not sure how accurate it is. But apparently, back when they achieved long-distance space travel and there weren't that many spacefaring civilizations yet, there was an incident. A very cautionary tale-like. So the story is that back then, things were quite different from how they are now. Most of the galaxy was unexplored. There were some very old races, older than what many believe is possible for a species saved to this universe. And no one got close to the regions, the mythical Type 5 species. And then there were the newcomers like the Valayans who were exploring around. Because the galaxy was so empty, they built up these huge empires, and eventually a second round of newcomers arrived. The Valayans called them fledglings. Sounds pretty fucking condescending. This may come as a shock to you, but seeming condescending has never once been a concern for them. Actually, that is not at all a shock to me, Lane. So this is when Valayans started to gain their reputation, I guess. That's right, guys that were lighting up the dark forests. Because most of the species that had been around a while were jerks, and Valayans alone were paragons of light and justice, helping everyone for purely altruistic reasons. I hope the sarcasm is coming across. And by alone, I mean there were multiple species that went around protecting the newcomers. It wasn't just Valayans, but they did take all the credit. It was apparently quite chaotic. Amidst all that, there was the species that stood out to Valayans as being exceptional, I guess. They advanced quickly, but were pacifists who had outgrown war, at least with themselves. And my father's people wanted to help them reach the next level. So Valaya shared a piece of important technology that would revolutionize their homeworld, solve many of their global crises, and allow them to focus on advancing their species. And of course they blew it. No, see, that's the thing. The gotcha is that they didn't blow it. They revolutionized their homeworld and solved their crises. But remember how I said Valayans believe you have to earn knowledge to use it responsibly? So what happened, allegedly, is that the Shalom encountered a race younger than them, wanted to be like their teachers. They shared what they had learned. It was that race who annihilated their entire star system and themselves as a result. And then Valayans withdrew into their territory, wrapped the entire sector in a massive dimensional sphere, and... I'm sorry, they did what? No! Wait! Don't repeat that. I'm going to pretend I did just hear something ridiculous. I don't think that part was the point of the story, Rafe. Rafe gathered his tools and headed for the door, rolling his eyes at Noel as he passed. If you ask me, it's for the best they left, locked up and threw away the key. We already have a cargo hold full of your weird-ass technology. Imagine if we get back to space dock and had to tell RJ we not only found a Valayan, but also the whole damn homeworld. Isn't he just the one that said Valayans for pearl clutchy for not sharing? Sounds like a pain in the ass. That describes a lot of things where Valayans are concerned, admittedly. Hope it doesn't describe you as well. I imagine it depends who you ask. That does not give me a lot of comfort, kiddo. Okay, if we're talking about being a pain in the ass, I think most of us are guilty of it on some days. Some more than others. I've never been a pain in anyone's ass in my life. Sure, Asher. They make products to help with that. Anyway, good grief, Asher. The casual work environments on some ships like this never cease to amuse. Oh my god. Interesting story, Lane. Who knows how accurate it is? It's just what they tell people like me to convince me that I should follow their ways. Historically, even cautionary tales start from a place of truth. This is true. Noel, sorry to interrupt story time, but we're about 10 minutes out from the fold point. We should begin to lock down procedures soon. Thank you, Phrase. Back to stations, everyone. I'm afraid we'll be sticking with our present course and not making any detours to hidden homeworlds. Sorry to disappoint, Asher. Duran, Rafe, return to stations. Literally walking out the door, Noel. Lane, you can return to quarters for now. We'll discuss handing over some responsibilities when Laren clears you for work. No need to rush things. I'll look forward to it. I'll see you later then. We'll have to talk to you more about Valayan history sometime. I'm sure we'll have plenty of opportunities. Noel nodded to me, and with the crew distracted by the impending fold, I left the bridge so they could focus. Uran walked out with me, and we caught up with Rafe a few minutes later as we stopped to check a control panel of some kind on his way out. Oh boy, time to talk to the other two, because we've talked with Daz and Asher and Noel. Now Rafe and Daz. Rafe and Uran. I'm fine. For a moment, we walked without speaking, and I wasn't sure if they were planning to escort me back to my quarters. Just to be clear, you don't have to walk me back. I'm not. Engineering just happens to be this way. My office as well. I can walk you to your room if you prefer, though. Insulted. Why would I be insulted? If I want to be really extreme. Definitely endeared. Ren is a sweetheart. The sheer disgust in his voice when he rejected the very idea of walking me back, paired with the gentle amusement of his psyche, brought a smile to my face. Basically, he was giving me a hard time. Oh, okay, so it was, that gives me more points with Rafe. Interesting. As usual. I suspected this would be the state of things going forward, though I didn't mind all that much. Our eyes met and I smiled at him, then had the utter amusement of watching the pointed tips of his ears turn red as he looked away. So, based on what Noel said just now, seems like you'll be sticking with us for a while. I guess that's what you two were discussing so long in private. I don't have a choice but to stick around unless I want to take a swan dive out the airlock, then try to swim through the vacuum to the nearest planet while holding my breath. But that seems like it would end poorly for me, so... Well, that would be a damn shame. Don't know what the hell a swan is, but still. Though it's disappointing the great and powerful Valayans can be taken out by something as ubiquitous as a vacuum of space. I've said we're not omnipotent, you may recall, and if you don't, it's worrying someone with that kind of memory problem is in charge of the engines. You'll have to forgive Rafe Lane. Giving other crew members a hard time is their most cherished hobby. By the way, Rafe, I've been meaning to ask, but he or they, either one, both? Because Laren used one and some of the others used the other. Rafe never seemed to make much difference, but it was always nice to be certain. I don't give a shit one way or the other, but to be totally honest, just pick one and stick with it so I could tell who the hell you're talking about. Okay, good to know, and I noticed about the hobby thing you ran. Oh, gosh. Which one? I think either way I'm going to get points with one of them. So we're gonna let the dice decide. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2. I smirked up at Rafe as we walked. It makes me wonder what his less cherished hobbies are. Wouldn't you like to know? I would. I just said that. We'll stick around and you'll get plenty of time to find out. Provided you don't annoy the hell out of me like Asher does. He grinned a little, though I get the feeling that won't be too much of a problem. I can at least guarantee I'll stick around for the next few weeks anyway. I make absolutely no promises about who I will and will not make it a point to annoy while I'm here. Oh, are you suggesting you'll leave the ship once we reach space dock in a few weeks? I haven't decided. It isn't as if I have anywhere else to go, but I mean, it's not as if any of you were expecting to take on a new crew member. It's also not like it's our first time picking up strays. Sim and Uren were picked up like that too. It wasn't a problem then, I doubt it's one now. I am starting to get the sense it's weirdly common here. Okay, so obviously if I'm doing the Wraith or Uren routes, which one I pick would matter. So I'm just going to let the dice decide. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. We're going to find out about Uren. I'm curious, how did the ship pick up Uren anyway? It's not that exciting a story, I'm afraid. I was serving on another vessel, a mining ship called the Scatter? We hit an asteroid convergence out of nowhere. The ship took heavy damage and we lost an entire section. I'm sure you already know but when a ship is damaged, the garden area is immediately protected with a heavy force field. Sim was in that area with me, so both of us were shielded. We were the only survivors, but we almost didn't make it either. The Ophelia answered the distress signal and found us still hanging on. What made you decide to stay? Sim basically fell in love with Kaeto at first sight, so she wasn't going anywhere. When Noel offered her a job, he offered me one at the same time, since our previous specialist was going off rotation soon anyway. And by offered her a job, Uren means Sim burst into Noel's office one day, slammed her resume down, and shouted that she'd been a lead engineer for 6 years and was in love with our armory officer. So please hire her, and I think Noel was too startled to say no, then he offered Uren a job as a matter of course. Based on what little I'd seen of her so far, I could absolutely picture Sim doing that. Anyway, the pay is better than on a guild ship, so I can help my parents more working here. I didn't see a reason to say no. You're supporting your parents? When they let me. They don't really need it, but, well, we were on Antares 8 when the asteroid hit. Well, not when it hit. We were there when it was detected, and I know in a lot of ways they still haven't recovered from that. So I do what I can to help them, when I can. Let's go with compassionate. This is very much going with my gut here. His eyes had gone gold around the center, an indication it was a subject that was difficult to talk about, I thought. I'm so sorry. I've been to Antares 8 before. I'm assuming the damage was... yeah. Total. We had enough time to evacuate, but everyone lost everything. Damn, that's terrible. There wasn't a way to divert the asteroid? I'm thinking of the meme with Zuko from Avatar: The Last Airbender. That's rough, buddy. The asteroid was over 1/4 the size of Antares 8 and wasn't detected until fairly late. Ooh, Damn. No one has the kind of technology or ships that can move something that size by the amount we needed. Our only option was evacuation, but it left a lot of us displaced. It was difficult for a long time. In some ways, it still is. I'm sorry to hear that, and Terrace 8 was a beautiful place. I can't imagine it being gone. How long ago was this? A while ago. I was only 12 when it happened. And now? 36. Ooh, 24 years. I'm still recovering. But if the asteroid was that big compared to the planet, it would have done a lot of damage. Losing your home must have been terrible. I guess you know something about that too. I haven't had a home in a very long time. Perhaps that will change if you decide to stay. Perhaps. Let's let the dice decide again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Win. We're gonna go the sympathy route. Just curious. Yeah, that's what I thought. I'm sorry if I made you discuss something unpleasant, Ren. There's no reason to apologize. I wouldn't talk about it if it was still difficult. It was a long time ago, after all. I gave him a careful look when he said that. Cool sadness flowed off him when discussing that memory, long time or not. I suppose what he meant was that it wasn't more difficult than he was willing to put up with. Yeah, there are some things that will be difficult to talk about regardless how much time has passed. And I had the sense he was the sort willing to put up with a lot. In any case, I'm not the only one who's had a tough time, even on this ship. We've all experienced difficulty. That goes for you as well. There's no use avoiding it just because it's difficult. You won't find anyone on this ship who suggests living and working out here is easy. We'd never talk about anything if we always had to avoid talking about what's hard. Difficult or not, this is also now a part of my home. You never lose something without gaining something else. That goes the other way too sometimes. Sometimes you can't forget what you lose, but you also shouldn't ignore the things you've gained. At least that's how I see it. Hint, hint. That's a good way to look at it, though it's not always easy to live that way. I suppose that it takes time to set aside the losses, or I suppose figure out if you want to keep the things you've gained. The things I've gained, huh? I knew what he was trying to say. I wasn't sure what kind of face I was making when he said it, though. Yuren, if you're speaking in riddles about whether Lane is going to stay aboard, you can just be more upfront about it. I wasn't meaning to speak in riddles. In any case, she'll sort herself out soon enough, I reckon. For what it's worth, though, I think this is a good ship. I'm sure you'll find it so as well. Thank you. I definitely don't have concerns about this being a good ship or a good crew. It's a little difficult to want to commit to staying somewhere when I still haven't quite got my bearings yet. I understand that all too well. There's no need to make a decision yet, so I hope you don't feel pressured. Of course not, and I do appreciate the reassurance. And with that, since your room is just ahead, I'll be heading the other way for engineering now. Oh, wait, we actually were right near my room, weren't we? I hadn't even realized we'd more or less reached the guest corridor. I thought you weren't walking me all the way. He shrugged and gave me the usual half smirk as he left. Yuren also had a slight smile as he continued down the corridor, lifting one hand in a wave. See you in the mess hall later on. Sure. Those two brats. They'd walked me the entire way back after all. I watched them a moment longer before retreating into my room. Alone again, I went to the bed to wait for the impending fold. I wondered how long I'd feel like I was suspended in this strange limbo, unable to come back and unsure how to move forward. It was true that if I got along well with the crew, there was no reason not to stay. I had nowhere else to go in particular. I didn't have a home, or no belongings to find or claim. There was just me. And I, in theory, had the freedom to go where I wanted, or to linger here as long as I desired to do so. I eyed the chairs on the other side of the room. Then, chewing the inside of my cheek, I moved there. Maybe it was time to take care of something I'd been putting off since I left medical. Moving the cup aside, I pulled the holographic screen from the top of the table. Query. Search for a ship. The CS Perseverance MG3. All ships associated with the UCW follow Universal Ship Identification Protocol. This includes a digital ensign that can be sent through the communications channels to identify a ship. There's also a system of prefixes assigned to ships of various types to identify who and what they are. Perseverance. I like that. When the computer didn't seem to register my voice, I let out a soft sigh, then tapped the screen to pull up an input interface so I could type it instead. Yeah, telepathy isn't going to help with the interfacing with the computer. There was a beep, and the profile of a familiar vessel appeared on the screen. Turning my teeth over my lip, I pulled the knee up and rested my elbow on it as I stared at the image. If I wanted to move on, I knew I was going to need to close this chapter first. There would be steps in the process, other things I had to accept and walk away from, but I had to start somewhere. I wanted to say goodbye properly. When the soft hum of the building filled my mind, I shut my eyes and let it sweep over me. The ship shuddered only a little, and outside everything blended into light. I turned back to my screen, steeled myself, and began to read about the fate of my old ship and its crew. It was time to let it go. Let it go, let it go. Okay, that's all I'm going to sing. Another full day cycle passed before Laren declared me fit for any sort of work. Probably for the best, since I had been up late reading. I hadn't cried. Somehow, I never cried. But I had grieved as I hunted down each one of them and read death records for the ones I could find. I wasn't sure what other send-off I could give them. I knew Belayan mourning him, but giving them a send-off like that, when Belayans were the reason it would be 500 years too late, felt hollow somehow. I could only say a prayer and hope it found their paths wherever they led next. And once I had done that, I had no choice but to come to terms with it all somehow. And by morning, I had wrapped up that bundle of grief in my heart and let it return to the stars as well. Somehow I felt lighter afterwards, but also tired again. A day later, Laren declared that my body had stabilized and I was ready for whatever responsibilities I wanted to take on, as long as I didn't overdo it for now. Which meant I was finally allowed to do more than stay in my room or walk to the galley. The first order of business then would be to get a tour of the ship. I was looking forward to seeing more of it than the little I'd explored so far. Okay. Especially more of the bridge, especially the engine room, especially the ship's garden, especially the labs and mysterious cargo. Looking forward to seeing everything, really. I was looking forward to seeing the crew going about their work. This is definitely an LI thing. I'm assuming this is Rave. You ran Daz? No. Asher. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. That's what I thought. Especially more of the bridge. I'd seen it before, of course, but just passing through. It was always one of the most interesting parts of the ship, and since I'd worked as bridge staff before, I was curious to have a closer look at how the technology had evolved. And though I'd been up there before, I hadn't had time to take a look around. I'd like a closer look at the stations, or even the pilot's cradle. I wonder why. Pilot's chair / cradle, the device in which a virtuoso sits when performing space folds. Basic pilot's cradle exists only to connect the virtuoso to the ship's systems for the purpose of safe folding. I wasn't pilot myself, but it wasn't like I didn't know my way around the controls just a little. Asher's face flashed through my mind, bringing a slightly regretful smile to my lips when I realized the thought of seeing him was something I looked forward to as well. I didn't even know him. But our interactions so far had been interesting, and he always made me laugh, even if it wasn't pure exasperation. That said, I couldn't help but wonder if that kernel of warmth was also due to the nostalgic connection I seemed to feel for everyone. I knew what it was, or what my father would call it. Nashir, a Valayan concept of joined souls or companions whose paths intertwined across lifetimes. It was silly and archaic, and Asher wasn't even the only one I felt that little click with. This entire crew felt like encountering a group of people I'd known before. Even if the concept was real, it was so broad it didn't exactly only encompass positive relationships. Valayans believed that any relationship could persist across journeys, even negative ones. Though I had to admit it was difficult to imagine Asher and I being mortal enemies in a past life or something. Maybe. Actually, if that were true, it would be even more interesting. Either way, I knew it was silly to get hung up on the idea of nature. Whether it was Asher or anyone else on the crew, for all I knew, it could mean I was a pet goldfish that had been really attached to the one who fed me little fish flakes in some distant past. In any case, I didn't want to let myself get stuck on that feeling. And with Asher, it wasn't just that. It's more that his antics were a bit of a bright spot in this temporary gray. Something that made this transition from the past into the present a little more pleasant. Nature, or just a cute pilot who was not quite as suave as he thought he was. It didn't have to be anything more than that for me to be happy at the thought of seeing him. I was just afraid of getting too attached too fast, that was all, and that was certainly the result of overthinking things. Probably. I leaned against the edge of the window watching the stars sweep past. In my hands I was turning over the small hollow recorder Noel had given me for starting my own log file, since I would be, at the very least, a temporary member of the crew. He only remembered after the fact that I needed one with a manual input adapter. He said he'd have it to me by the end of the day. It would be interesting to get back in the habit of crew member logs. When my door chime went off a few minutes later, I set down the hollow recorder. Looks like it's time. I wasn't sure who it was going to be, actually. They hadn't told me. I assumed it was whoever had some free time to throw away showing the new girl around the ship. It's gonna be Asher. Because I picked the thing about the bridge. The door slid open seconds later. Yep. So, looks like we're doing Asher's romance here. But no guarantees. I'm gonna see what's going on with Kat before I fully decide. Asher was there leaning against the side of the door with a grin already on his face, even before our eyes met. I couldn't help but smile as soon as I saw him. Ready to go? Yeah, sure. I didn't know you would be the one showing me around today. Though I'd just been thinking I wanted to see him, so I wasn't complaining. He shrugged as I joined him in the hall. I volunteered. Did you now? Somehow I'm not surprised. Of course not. Not like I turned down the chance to spend some quality time alone with the most interesting person on board. I highly doubt I fit that qualification, unless it's just because I'm new. Oh no, you most definitely do, and it has nothing to do with you being new. Oh boy. I will say I do like that we get glimpses of the crew's relationships with each other as well in the course of this. It's not just about their relationships with the ally, it's the relationships with the crew as a whole. Let's go with Charmed. And my stupid smile went wider in spite of myself. I couldn't stop the slight flush of warmth from rising to my face. The fun thing, switching gears slightly, about Andromeda 6 is you can choose how to flirt with your potential love interest. You can choose whether to be flirty or shy, but definitely interested. Haha, I figured that would give us more brownie points with them. His flirting always seemed to get to me somehow, even though his lines weren't all that original, and if it was anyone else, I might not find it nearly as charming. But his interest was genuine, of that much I was certain, so it continued to get a pass for now. So where are we starting our tour today? Wherever you want. I mean, it ain't a big ship, just a few decks, so there's not that much to see. You'll probably learn everything I can show you just from looking at the schematics. But it's not the same as actually seeing it in person. In fact, I imagine you've already seen the interesting parts. I've seen the galley, the bridge, and some hallways, Asher. And medical. Yes, and I'm very well acquainted with medical. Even so, everything else is about what you'd expect from a ship of this class. I've never seen a ship of this class. I've been out of the loop long enough that just about everything is going to surprise me on some level, most likely. And small or not, this one looks impressive for something privately funded. Well, R&J have a decent-sized business on Palmyra 4, aside from what they make from any materials or items we bring back. It's something that's been in their family for a couple of generations now. They aren't exactly wanting for money. We aren't even their only ship. They don't have a small fleet or anything, but they have a few ships roaming around out here. Impressive. And what is the ship's primary mission out here? Surely not just black hole dives and treasure hunting. Well, when we're not locating, mapping, diving into black holes, we do a fair amount of surveying new solar systems and planets too. Galaxy's only, 46% explored these days? A lot of undiscovered territory out there. Progress! I think UCW was at 32% in my day. Well, with the Nexus leaving huge portions of it isolated outside even the furthest gates and hubs, you still gotta do it the old-fashioned way. That's part of what we do. When we find some interesting place, we survey it, record its location and basic information. We do some resource gathering, but it's not our primary mission. And if we find interesting artifacts or tech from abandoned worlds, we gather those. I guess you could say part of our directive is to find interesting things. Besides our salaries, we get an additional percentage based on the value of what we bring back, whether it's information or items. I guess the lab gremlins study some of it too, but most of it we take back to the teams on Palmyra 4. Noel said you have to file reports on your finds, but I guess since you're privately funded, you don't have to abide by guild regulations. Nope, not all of them anyway. All the guilds do their damnedest to control as much as they can out here, but they can't get their hands on every find or every ship's records. So we just have Robert's directives to worry about, but he gives us a lot of free reign out here. That must be nice. Well, I don't have much else to weigh it against like the others, but it seems to work out well for us. So it was a general exploration vessel with a research element in there as well. That made sense with what I'd already learned about the ship. So, here's the garden, keeps us alive, and it's also a nice place to just hang out. When we stepped through the entrance, the garden was everything I would have hoped for it to be. The air was humid and heavy with the scent of soil, vegetation, and life. Wow! Ah, so beautiful. All the flowers and even little lights and benches and a fridge and water, because of course they're plants, they need water. There were large trees sweeping moss, grass, and above us arched an unobstructed view of space. All around us was the chirping of insects and even small birds. We'd walk straight through the shields at the door, feeling only a slight tingle as we passed them. They didn't impede us, but they'd be programmed to prevent any smaller life forms from leaving the area. For a moment, I stopped to take it in. I jumped when Asher took my hand, leading me further in, not expecting the sudden contact. It's funny, when I was younger, I used to hide in places like this all the time. When I stowed away, I mean. Usually there's some little corner tucked away where no one can see, a hidden spot you can sleep unnoticed. So even now, I like coming here if I need a break from things. I figured you'd like it too. Is there anyone on board who doesn't like it here? Maybe the lab gremlins, or a couple of them anyway. Never see those guys outside the labs. I guess they're a special breed. Yeah, but for normal people, this is sure as hell beats the space labs by a pretty wide factor. I don't know, a lab can be interesting too, depending on what they're studying. This right here. I'd probably end up being a lab gremlin, let's be honest. Not for someone like me, I guess. I'm not the intellectual type like Daz and the others. I gave him a knowing smile, but he just shrugged and grinned. Lab work can be interesting, but it depends what you're working on. I'm a lot more interested in living beings than something like astrophysics. All living things or just some of them? We can flirt. Oh, one in particular at the moment. Oh, there's one in particular at the moment. I guess a sidelong look his way, letting a slight smile play on my lips, because I knew he'd pick up on the flirting immediately. A slow grin spread over his features as he tipped his head back. I saw his tongue flash over his teeth before he moved closer. I didn't move away, amused by how easy it was to flip that switch for him. I mean, might as well enjoy it a little, right? It wouldn't hurt if it was just a little. Same. Every so often I encounter a living thing that makes me suddenly very interested in biology in particular. Encountered one recently, in fact. Just biology, not chemistry. History is good, maybe a little experimentation too, for the sake of science. When he came even closer to me, I set my hands on his chest, holding him at bay as a whispering laugh escaped. Of course, experimentation can be dangerous without the proper safety controls in place. I wouldn't know about safety so much, still new to this science stuff. Well, for the sake of science, I can educate you a little. I'm all ears. Every good experiment starts with research. You never know when two things might react in a volatile way. So you need to learn the subject matter a little better before you start experimenting with an unknown. I'm up for some research about the latest unknown in my life. I slipped away from him, going further down the path into the garden, still laughing as I smirked over my shoulder. Asher grinned and followed along behind me, catching up quickly. Any particular research topics that interest you then? Okay. And tell me this about yourself, Ms. Unknown. If you're interested in research or whatever, why didn't you go into a scientific field instead of lingering in ship operations, fixing broken pipes and power couplings? It's just easier to keep my head down with something like ship operations, and it covers some scientific areas as well, since it's a broad field. When you try to be a xenobiologist or a psychologist, people want credentials, and how am I going to tell them I studied with the neural uplink to the Athenaeum on Valea? Doesn't matter how much knowledge you have, if you can't prove it. You know, speaking of Valea, Daz was telling me that some believe Scions, Valayans, created virtuosos. You heard that one before? Oh yeah, I'd forgotten that rumor got around. For a moment I toyed with feigning ignorance, but there was no real reason to, and I wondered what his reaction would be to the truth. What if I told you it's true? Seriously? How does that work? Did they just go around and mess with the genetic evolution of other races? Give us the ability to hear the stars? Something like that, yeah. Wait, does that mean it's like a natural ability for your people or something then? Yes and no, I suppose. If you're asking whether we can all hear star song, then the answer is no. If you're asking whether some of us could hear it naturally during that period, the answer is yes. It's a pretty common gift among Valayans in general. So Valayans can naturally fold space and decide to share that ability? I thought they didn't share technology. Granted, altering genetic evolution isn't quite the same as sharing technology, though it's kind of much worse. This was back before they isolated themselves as well, but you know what they didn't do? Also share the technology to create artificial wormholes and space folds. They just deposited some genetic manipulation and walked away. But why would they do it? I think it was a way to help younger races with space travel. You said it yourself, huge parts of the galaxy aren't accessible through the gate system. Not only does that hinder exploration and growth, but it means societies that develop in those areas may be forever cut off from the rest. And all that aside, the wormhole nexus won't last forever. From the sound of it, it's become even more unstable than it was 500 years ago. And when it collapses, that'll mean the end of interstellar space travel without some other method. They were also just a very different people back then, I think. My phone made noise. Turned it to silent. It would be a problem if anyone was to rely on virtuosos to completely replace the gate system. There aren't a lot of us even now, and how many millions would you need to replace the Nexus, given stamina limits, range limits? I never said it was a successful plan. Given the rarity of virtuosos, maybe the plan didn't take hold as they wanted. It's possible the gene mutation wasn't able to thrive in other species. I guess that's true. It's interesting to think the ability came from Archaeans, though. I mean, it's kind of like a type of telepathy, right? What we do? In a way, but it involves telekinesis as well. Another thing my father's people are gifted at. Some of them, anyway. Somehow it's interesting that your people are responsible for someone like me existing, and I'm getting to meet you face to face. Is it that interesting? It's not like I was responsible for that whole business. You don't think it's interesting? I guess I never thought about it before. I have to admit, no virtuoso I've met has ever asked me about it either, and I've met a few. Aw, you're going to make me feel bad if you talk about all the other singers you've met. You're the first I've had a decent conversation with, if that helps. I guess it helps a little. For a moment he didn't speak again, and we made our way to the far side of the garden. So, virtuoso abilities are based on Valayan abilities. His voice was a bit thoughtful as I mulled that over again aloud. I gave him a curious and sidelong look. That was more reflective a tone than I was used to hearing from him. I never really even thought about where this kind of skill came from until Dad said something. It was always something that just was. You never had a reason to think about where it came from before, I guess. You know, since the genetic alterations were based on Valayan DNA, maybe that's why most virtuosos can learn contact telepathy. Seriously? You weren't aware? No, what the hell? You're saying I can learn real telepathy? Maybe he'd never learned that because he hadn't been trained in the guild. I felt like most guild virtuosos had at least some skill with it, even if it was very low level. Oh. There. That's the most impersonal version. Touch his face or touch his palm? So it's going to be one of these two. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Four. Touch his palm. If I don't like it, I can go back. Reach for his hand, moving my fingers over the back and around to the front where I could press our palms together. Okay, yeah. Generally, touching the face or head might have been more effective, but it felt like it might be a little uncomfortable. Then again, this was Asher. He'd probably enjoy it, especially if I based it on the way his eyes went wide and his psyche flushed a warm pink as my fingers went between his. I almost laughed at that look on his face, even though I didn't mean anything by it. Touching his hand just felt like the natural strategy for this. Still, the reaction was adorable in its own way. Then try it? Like I said, with physical contact, it's always easier. I've never done anything like telepathy before. You literally do it every time you fold space, technically. That's different. His fingers closed around my hand as he stepped close again. Then think of it this way. There's a first time for everything, isn't there? Unless you don't want to try. Well, I think I'll give it a shot. Feels like cheating when I'm sending to someone who can already read minds, though. Then I won't read your thoughts. I'll just be open to receiving whatever you send. Alright. He met my gaze, staring into my eyes as he concentrated. There's a little blip in my head. Not words or even an image. It's almost like picking up a faint signal I couldn't quite make out. That's it. Just keep trying. He let out a soft breath. A hazy thought flashed through my mind. It was half-formed, vague, little more than the general idea of doubt and curiosity. The belief he couldn't do it cut off almost as soon as it formed. Overtaken by a dim thought of finding me attractive and the idea of a kiss. He would! That brought another smile to my face. It was typical of a beginner, something vague being cut off by an intrusive thought he had no intention of acting on. Stray thoughts like that were the bane of telepathic language, and given it was Asher, I wasn't shocked that it was a thought that was the thought that intruded. Pulled my hand away from him, still smiling. It wasn't bad for a first attempt. You were trying to say something about not thinking it would work. Haha, yeah, it was something like that. So I'm gonna go back. I want to see what happens if I touch his face. I reached up and touched the side of his face, my fingertips resting on his cheek. Look at that blush! Why don't you give it a try? Like I said, it's easier with physical contact like this. He reached up, covering my hand with his. That little smile of his was playing on his lips again. Just like this? I don't know that it has to be just like this, no. I don't know that it... But sometimes it's easier if the proximity to the source of consciousness and thought is closer. So touching the face, which is, you know, a part of your head, is more effective than, say, touching hands. As long as both people are comfortable. I shrugged. Oh, so you're comfortable caressing my face? I wouldn't call this a caress exactly. But if I wasn't comfortable, I wouldn't do it. The question is whether you're comfortable with it. I don't mind it. Then why not try to establish a telepathic link instead of just flirting? Isn't it cheating when you're already able to read minds? I won't read your thoughts. Just be open to receiving anything you're able to send. Alright then, I guess I'll give it a shot. He shut his eyes, and for a moment there was nothing. Then a brief flutter at the edge of my mind. It was mostly drowned out by the strength of his emotions. But beyond that, there was an intrusion at the edge of my mind. It wasn't words exactly, sort of an image tinged with a rosy color. It was Asher's consciousness, though I wasn't able to form a proper message yet. That's it. Just keep trying. Asher let out a soft breath and furrowed his brow, trying to focus harder. Don't try to force it, Asher. I moved my hand from his cheek and rested 2 fingers on his forehead. Just let it come naturally. I've already opened my mind to your thoughts. All you have to do is look for that opening and walk through. He shut his eyes and for at least a few seconds seemed to be making a serious effort. The cloud at the edge of my mind focused itself, coalesced into a shape. There was the semblance of a coherent thought, doubt he could make it work, frustration it was harder than he thought, worry he looked silly, and beneath it a dim sense of finding me attractive. That brought another smile to my face. Those sorts of vague and distracting thoughts were the bane of telepathic language, and given it was Asher, I wasn't shocked that it was the thought that intruded. Pulled my hand away from him, still smiling. I'll stick with this one. My eraser, there it is. It wasn't bad for a first attempt. You were trying to say something about not thinking it would work. Yeah, it was something like that. I could get a sense of it, but it was vague. If you want to send clearer messages, I think you'll need to practice, and at least believe it's possible. It's hard to learn to do something if you don't think you can. But if you want to try, I can help. It'll be easier with me since I'm naturally receptive to thought speech, but you should be able to eventually do it with others as well. I think it would be great to learn it. Then I'll help you, but maybe another time. We got a little sidetracked from the tour. Ha, yeah, I'll show you everything else. Come on. Well, I guess it's pretty common. I know a lot of people have trouble sleeping in space. We had been walking around looking at various ship areas, but mostly just chatting about the crew, about the ship, about some of their recent finds, their work, their stops, R&J, and about sleep habits, I suppose. It's the lack of day and night. It throws out the circadian rhythm of most species. Insomnia was an issue on every ship I've been on. Guess we really weren't meant for living out here. If we weren't meant to be here, we wouldn't be here. Every species encounters new habitats, and they adapt. Even out here, everyone finds ways to entice sleep. Routines, relaxing sounds, that sort of thing. We adapt. I usually listen to music. Did I listen to music when I went to sleep last night, though? I was very tired when I got home last night. Let's see where it is. Oh, there it is. I did. Okay. I also listen to music when I'm driving home to and from work. It keeps me awake and focused. Tell me about it, Rafe and his rain ambiance. I personally prefer to just listen to the star song. It's relaxing enough for me that sleep isn't an issue most of the time. You know, I remember there used to be this simulation created by virtuosos where they tried to recreate the sounds they usually hear from the cosmos. Ah, yeah, I've heard of that sort of thing. There's a whole library of it you can buy and listen to now. Do you find it accurate? Eh, not really. I mean, sort of. I reckon it's the closest they can get with normal instruments and tools. A lot of people I used to know found it uncomfortable to listen to. I've heard that before too, but you can't capture the layers properly. There's always something deeper than just the sound of the music I hear. Something that reaches into you and pulls, tugs at your soul. Can't recreate that with a flute, you know? I guess not. I've always thought it would be fascinating to hear what a virtuoso does, but alas. No star song to lull me to sleep at night, I suppose. So you can't hear it at all, even being Valayan? I can sense some of it beyond the mental block, but there's a lot out there in the deep besides star song, and I don't like to keep myself open to it. I think it would be more likely to keep me awake than entice sleep. Then what do you do when you've got insomnia? Or are Valayans too all-powerful for something like insomnia? Boy. Okay, I'm a night wanderer, sort of a night wanderer myself. I go for walks, tend to read. I find the sound of storms relaxing. I'd rather listen to music of some kind. I usually go spend time in the garden when I can't sleep. Okay, we're gonna let the dice decide this one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and if I get a 6, I'll roll again. 4. Which one was 4? I'd rather listen to music. That's what I do. I did not try to get a 4. That's just the number that came up. So either the dice were listening or it's just pure coincidence. Did I save? Yes, I did. Suppose I'd rather just listen to music over anything else. Something soft and relaxing. I might not hear star songs, but regular music always relaxes me in a way other things can't. See, now that makes sense. Occasionally I turn on something else to listen to as well, just for some variety. There's some great Mylorian operas on the ship's musical database. Great. I got a bot. Over 2 hours. I don't know how much longer we're gonna go, but it feels like this is towards the end of the chapter. Mylorian. I think that's what Yeren and Rafe are. I think, yeah. Oh. Yeren is... Oh, that's not... Yeah. Rafe is Mylorian and Handea. And Yeren is pure Mylorian. You could tell that they're similar species because their ears and their eyes. Anyway, you listen to Mylorian opera? He grinned. Didn't figure me for an opera sort of guy? Nope, not even going to deny it. I would enjoy opera more if I could understand the words. But having to sit there and read along would be very distracting because I want to see what's going on the opera. And if I'm just listening to it, then yeah, I can sit there with the words in front of me with the translation. You'd be surprised. I mean, I listen to a lot of stuff, music from all across the galaxy, anything that sounds good, but Mylorian opera in particular is beautiful. I may have to check some out sometime. I'll recommend a few good ones. You'd be surprised how spicy the stories get. There was actually an opera that I caught part of it's called Der Rosenkavalier, obviously German, and it's kind of cool. I forget I came in on the middle of it. I forget how I found it, but it was really interesting, and then I tried to watch it from the beginning and just couldn't get into it. I felt really bad. I do still have it somewhere in my DVD collection. You told me you speak Mylorian languages too? They have a global language actually, named Fulan. I picked up quite a lot, but I'm probably barely conversational. I also have a translator though. I smiled at him, both surprised and amused. Huh. I folded that little piece of trivia up to think about later. I'd learned a lot about him today, hadn't I? Not surprised you like the spicy stories, though. They're the most interesting ones. After that conversation, it didn't take much longer for Asher to show me the rest of the ship. As he said, it was small. He saved the bridge for last because I'd mentioned wanting to take a longer look at it. He also had to return to work after giving me my tour, so it made sense for both of us to end things there. It was nice that they let me poke around enough to satisfy my curiosity anyway. I'd worked on worse ships for sure. Much worse, in fact. Not a single ship I'd worked on before had been as top of the line as this one seemed to be. The others were busy as he showed me around, and soon we were staring out the viewport into space, standing just in front of his usual chair. The pilot's cradle, mostly horizontal seat, meant to support him during long folds. Most virtuosos went at least partially limp when focusing on folding and listening to the song to plot out safe routes. What do you think? It's impressive. Last time I was here, I didn't really get to look around. It's where I spend most of my waking hours. Do you think it's a place you can see yourself spending time going forward? I'm starting to think so, yeah. Maybe. I'm glad to hear it. It would be a shame if this was only a brief stopping point for you. Lane, before you go, I wanted to suggest you come to my office later so we can discuss your exact responsibilities going forward. Daz has given me a preliminary write-up of how he wants to approach the mess in the cargo hold. Cataloging all that is the first order of business. I can show you what he came up with, but I thought you'd like an idea of what you might be working on after that. Alright, Laren wanted me in medical for a final checkup. How about after that? Sounds good. I guess that's my cue to let you get back to work, Asher. Thank you for showing me around. It was my pleasure, and I mean that. I'll see you later on. Don't forget what I told you about coming to the rec room this evening. It will be nice to see you somewhere besides the galley. I won't forget. Good. See you then. With that, I left the bridge so Asher and the others could get back to work. This place is already winding itself into me. The connection I felt with the crew would probably grow stronger the longer I spent here. I could only imagine how little it would take before I wouldn't want to leave. That thought filled me with more trepidation somehow than going off on my own. I wasn't sure why. Maybe because after just a little while walking around with one of them, being here felt like I'd slipped into a hole in this crew, one that was meant for me. For all my frustration at my father, there was an equal amount of frustration stemming from that point alone. If I fit here so well, didn't that just mean he'd been justified all along? No. He still didn't have the right to make that choice for me. I could accept the belief that paths would shift so that you ended up in the places you were meant to be. But that didn't mean he had to offer himself up as a method for facilitating it. It didn't mean he was correct for ignoring my agency and putting me here without doing the bare minimum of talking to me first. Why has talking always been so hard for him? I hated it. And I hated how I couldn't do anything here without his shadow looming over it. I took a deep breath and pushed those thoughts away, because lingering on them still left a fluttery, anxious feeling in the pit of my stomach. There was one more thing I desperately wanted to leave behind. For now, I'd get down to medical for my last checkup, then Dr. Knoll. Let's go back to general. Or, no, it feels like that was a promise to Asher. So... later I go to the rec room like I promised. Later I go to the rec room like I promised, and maybe I was looking forward to it. A little. Maybe instead of wallowing in doubt or fear of what it meant to fit in here, I should allow myself to be properly interested in the other crew members. Maybe if I was going to make connections on this crew, then I should make them well this time. Because maybe if I did that, they'd be less easily broken than the ones from before. I didn't want to pour my heart into bonds that could be shattered with so little effort. Not again. Not this time. I couldn't hold back forever, and in that case, why hold back at all? Took a breath and released it. Right, time to find Laren. Perhaps I'd ask a little more about game night while I was there. And hopefully I get cleared to start work right away. That was what I was looking forward to the most. And after that, who knew? I need to just let the future happen and stop worrying so much. So that's what I intended to do. Coming soon. Okay, we're gonna go back to general this time for sure. There we go. Okay, so let's see, gallery. So now we have both pictures of Asher so far. One of Daz, none of Cav, two of Noel. Here's the one from chapter 2. Just one of Brave, two of Ren. And still just the two of the MC. Oh, that's right. Let's see if there's any bonus scenes. Nope, no bonus scenes. Only for the first chapter. Okay, that's good because this took longer than I thought it would. Okay, so that's it for today. I don't know what I'm gonna next stream, but when I do, it'll probably be World of Warcraft. I'm not sure if it'll be classic or retail. I haven't decided yet. So thank you all for joining me, for watching. If you're watching on YouTube, please like, share, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. For those of you who aren't subscribed, excuse me, on YouTube, thank you very much. Drink food, drink water, eat food, stay warm if it's cold, stay cool if it's hot. Take care, and have a great day. Bye!